As you work inside of After Effects, it's important to take control over preview quality. This will make the app much less frustrating. Normally, as you work, things are probably set to full quality. Well, the challenge with this is as you drag through, depending upon the speed of your machine, it may not be real time. Now, fortunately, computers keep getting faster and faster, and I'm working on a really robust computer here, so I'm not having a lot of problems. But if I needed to, I can drop this to half quality. And now previews are pretty much instant. It's not rendering every pixel, it's rendering every other pixel, but still, that's enough as I work to really get an idea. Additionally, if you wanted to temporarily drop quality, you can also do adaptive resolution. This means that as you drag or move things, it will temporarily drop quality. So if I were to scale this up, for example, temporarily it's going to drop quality and then draw it at full quality. This is quite useful. Remember, you'll find these controls mostly here. This lets you assign which resolution you want to work with. This isn't for rendering, this is just for previewing as you're working. Additionally, the adaptive resolution generally works well. If you're working with a really robust project, then you can look at wireframes, and that's just going to show you outlines. So if we step into the logo here, and we switch this to just the wireframe view, you'll notice that I see just the bounding boxes of the areas. Now, that's hard to animate with, but good if you're just trying to check timing for things. Notice each of these is independent. Normally, I'm going to keep this at final quality so I can really get a good idea of what's happening as I build. Additionally, you'll find the transparency grid here. So if you want to see this over a Photoshop style grid or over black, you can adjust that. All right, let's go here to the main piece, set that to final quality and full. And now as I preview, I'm seeing the full animation. Additionally, instead of previewing the whole composition, you can adjust the work area here. Maybe you just want to see part of the logo. Now when you preview, it will go between these two frames, the beginning and the end of the work area. You can adjust these handles as needed by dragging, or press the keyboard shortcut such as B for beginning and the letter N for end. Now your preview will fall just within that space, letting you take a look at just part of your animation if you're making tweaks. I hope these preview strategies really cut down on some of your waiting time, but let's look at a few more techniques. Let's explore another option that really will affect how well After Effects runs. Inside of After Effects, if you go to your settings, you'll find Media and Disk Cache. The cache is a temporary area that can store pre-computes or pre-render files that can be reused to speed things up. Generally, you're going to pick a fast disk like an SSD. I'm going to empty mine out here and click OK. Now, let's look at this project for a moment. We have our logo from before. Once I preview that, it's cached to disk, hence the green bars. I see we previewed that at full quality and final quality there. Here's the background. It too is previewed. That's pretty cool. So now let's look at them together. If I turn off some of these interim layers and hit go, you see how fast it's able to pre-compute and put all those pieces together. Let's turn on the blue layer. We're missing a few frames, but it starts to figure it out. And as soon as I hit the space bar, it's able to pull those in. What's great here is that After Effects is able to store those temporary files and easily reuse them. For example, if I close this project, let's save our changes, and I reopen it, the preview files are right there too. Now, these preview files are stored on your system, not with the project itself. So if you were to move machines, you might have to re-preview. But what this does is it makes it much easier for your frequent files to not have to constantly recalculate. As you make small tweaks, as you add a drop shadow, change the scale of something, not every layer has to be reprocessed. This is really effective, and by using things like nested comps here, I can have an even better performance because those get cached at the comp level. Make sure you take a look at these cache settings. It really is going to speed up your workflow. Once a project is done, you ultimately need to render. Render produces a finished set of still images, sequentials, that you can play back in another program, or a rendered movie file. These frames or movies are then taken into other apps or sometimes posted directly to the internet or dropped in a presentation. Here I've got a finished infographic, an animated one in fact, and it's just explaining some storage aspects. Well, what I want to do is be able to export this to a new file. To do this, I'll choose Composition, Add to Render Queue. And by default, it loads it here into the render queue. What we need to do is make some tweaks. I'll press the Accent Grave key to make this tab a little bigger and twirl these down. The first set of settings are the render settings. Normally, best settings is chosen, but if you click, you'll see different choices to help you out here. Multi-machine gets pretty complex and is good for really big jobs, but it's beyond the scope of today. But what we can do is start with best settings and click. This is going to be what you use most often. Best quality, full resolution. Well, that entails pretty much what you want most of the time, unless you're just doing something for quick review. Then you could drop it to draft quality, for example. I'm going to use all effects and respect all switches, so this best template works pretty well. And I want to make sure that frame blending is turned on, and if I was working with footage, I can use fields, but I don't need that here because I have no footage in here, no actual movie clips that are interlaced. I'm going to make sure, though, to do the entire length of comp so I don't accidentally render out just the work area. And we'll make sure that motion blur is on for checked layers. Now I can click OK. You'll see that it's mostly based on best settings. If you want, you can make a template out of that and resave it and give it a new name, or choose what your default area is when you're rendering. I'll call this best settings, LOC for length of comp. And I can even set that here as the default and click OK. Next is the output module. This is the type of file you're actually writing. If I click here, I could choose what I want. Most of the time when going to a professional video application, you use the QuickTime exporter. And you might decide under format options which codec to use. Things like Apple ProRes is pretty common here. Or the Avid DNX HD codec. That's going to be what you're going to use if you are going to Premiere Pro. However, in this case, I'm going to hit cancel for a second because I'm not going to a video editing tool, I'm going to the web. So making an H.264 file is probably the right way to go. From the format options, you can now decide on the encoding quality. CBR is the bit rate, and 2's pretty low. Let's bump this up to something closer to 5 so it's not so pixelated. And click OK. If I want even more control, I can do VBR, which will adjust the quality dynamically based on what's needed. Generally results in higher quality and a smaller size. If using VBR, you can usually bump this up because it'll go with higher quality when needed and reduce the bit rate when it can. I'll click OK. Looking that over, I've got our options and I could choose OK to store it. Additionally, you can add another output module and it adds another flavor here. So if I were to click, I can look at this here and evaluate. Maybe there's no audio and I want one, I'll just turn the audio off. Or maybe I want to bump up the quality here for a presentation. Well, I could take the target bit rate higher and let's go to 25. Maybe we're dropping that into a presentation. There we go. Target bit rate, we'll set that down to 20 with a max bit rate of 25. There we go. And I'll click OK. And you see that both of those have been added. Now we can choose where to render. I'll put these out to the desktop for now. And as I save this here, I just have to be certain not to reuse a name. So I'll label this one HQ for higher quality because it has a larger bit rate. Look it all over, and when I'm set, I can click the render button. Now, if you want to render in the background and keep working in After Effects, you can do that too. That's useful if you've got a project going and you want to spit something out for review, but still keep working on other parts. In that case, you would click the Q and AME, which stands for Adobe Media Encoder. It's a companion tool that you can load from Creative Cloud, and it lets you process video in the background. But for now, I'll just click render. You can see it's processing, and when it's all done, it makes a sound. If you click, you'll go right to those files. There they are. And I've got the two options. Now, in this case, the target bitrate ended up being about the same. But there we go. Nice, high-quality animation ready to post to the social media timeline. There we go. Pretty cool. So you can go in and continue to tweak those settings. Now, if you decide you want to, you can always open this back up, select the item here in the render queue, and just press Command-D to duplicate. And you see it reopens the project and adds the render modules. Maybe I want to go in and tweak the data rate here, for example. So H.264, and we'll go with a constant bit rate here. And we'll take this one up to 25. Click OK. And store it. And then come down here to this one. And we'll do the variable bit rate. And we'll set the target bit rate here to 25 with a max bit rate of 40. Click OK. And when I render, those will also be created. Once they're done, just click and you go right to the file. So you see there's that really high quality one that we made earlier. That was a constant bit rate. There we go. Significantly larger file size, but maybe that's what you need. But having this ability to do multiple output modules really comes in handy. All right, hopefully you feel a little bit more comfortable with the render queue itself. It's quite effective. Sometimes when you render, you'll want to embed transparency into the new file. That's what I have here. If you take a look at this project, you'll see that we've got some keyed footage, and I'd like to actually export this with the transparency intact. When I add this to the render queue, what I need to do is actually tweak the settings. Looking at this here, I'm going to click on the output module and make sure to choose a professional format like QuickTime. Additionally, click on Format Options. You'll need to go with a high quality option like ProRes 4x4. This allows you to embed transparency data, or some of the other options here might have it as well, such as DNx HD. I'll click OK to store that, and then switch this to RGB plus alpha. That's going to include the alpha channel in the file. And we can include the pre-multiplied cleaned up edges. That looks good. I'll click OK. And look that over and render. Now it puts the file out to disk with the transparency data included. Let's come to Premiere Pro here for a moment, and let's just drop that clip in. There it is. And we can drop it onto a higher layer. There we go. Let's just scale it a little bit. Select that top layer. There we go. And drop him into place. So now he's inserted into the environment with the transparency data included, as you can see here. It's pretty useful. Knowing when you have transparency that you can render with it is very powerful. Whether you're working with a logo or keyed footage, gives you greater flexibility as you move into the edit. For example, here, I can tweak what part of the shot is shown and change it over the background. There we go. Let's just adjust. And we can see the overall change. Pretty cool. When you render in After Effects, you can actually render multiple things at once. This is quite useful because it means you could render during downtime, like a lunch break or a phone call, or if it's a big job, even overnight. All you have to do is have a sequence open or a comp and say, add to render queue. Then go to the next item, same thing, add to render queue. Each job gets queued up. Be sure to look it over. Maybe you need more than one format. Remember, you can click the Add button there and choose different targets. Just click the plus button here and set the preset. There we go, 3 different options. Come down here. Maybe I need a high quality with alpha channel movie. Look it over. Once you're all ready, save the project and then just press the caps lock key. That'll disable preview. When you're all set, you can click Render, or again, queue in Adobe Media Encoder to run in the background. Let it render, and it will show you your progress, like such. Once it's all done, it'll chime, letting you know that the job is done. My name's Rich Harrington, and I hope you enjoyed taking this look at After Effects. The goal here was to get you started with the essential skills. There's a lot more to After Effects, and it can do a whole bunch. I've got a lot of training out there, and there's a ton of other great training as well. Thanks again for watching, and be sure to keep in touch.